Yes, we were. But the freeze continues. Or the fight against the freeze continues. Okay, I'm proud to be joined by my colleague, Senator Murray, our ranking member of Appropriations, Senator Peters, ranking member of Homeland Security, and Senator Heinrich, ranking member of Energy Committee. So, in one instant, in the blink of an eye, in the dark of night, Donald Trump committed one of the cruelest actions that I have seen the federal government do in a very long time. Shutting off billions, maybe trillions of dollars of things that average American families need. Everything was on the line. Our police officers who keep us safe, our firefighters who keep us safe, hospitals, particularly rural hospitals that need their funding to help sick people. Our cities, our schools, from one end of the country to the other, you cut off school funding, property taxes go up. People hate property taxes. And every corner of the country is feeling the wrath of Donald Trump's cruel plan. In fact, I call his plan, it can be described many bad ways. It is lawless. It is foolish. But it also could be described by the three C's: chaotic, careless, cruel. Every corner of the country is just in panic about what Donald Trump will do. And make no mistake about it, this was not an accident. This was not something said, oh, we need to study a few things. I was asked today by somebody, well, don't they need to study the federal government programs? They can study them, but you don't cut them first and then study them later. That's backwards. That's ridiculous. And Donald Trump's plan, make no mistake about it, it's Project 2025 by another name, going to be led by Project 2025's originator and leading opponent, Russell Vought, who's going to be at the head of OMB, which has the power to do all of these cruel things. Millions of Americans were left scrambling yesterday to figure out how this would hurt them. From one end of my state to the other, I got calls from so many different people, and I'm sure that's true in every one of our states. Donald Trump, with his cruel policy, has aroused the American people and begun to show them how this administration is not for working families, but for the billionaires, because they want to make these cuts so they can cut taxes on the wealthiest of Americans and the biggest corporations. My office was smothered by an avalanche of calls from New Yorkers, local leaders in every part of my state, furious that the administration would do this with no notice, with no understanding. Again, chaos reigned. I got calls from a whole lot of Republican town supervisors and mayors asking, what about flood prevention? What about sewer construction projects? They had shovel-ready projects to go. Should they send the workers home? Chaos, fear for this reckless and lawless program. To show you how this is affecting all of America, just some of the calls, a few of the calls I got from my state. A food bank, Feedmore, in Western New York, fearful that they wouldn't be make deliveries to hungry people should they shutter their operation. Rochester Head Start. They get a check next week should they shut down Head Start. And what will happen to all the families whose kids go to Head Start and who work? Can't go to work. I got calls from the Family and Children's Association of Long Island. They treat substance abuse. They get weekly funding payments or biweekly. What are they going to do? Tell these people who are in the middle of therapy and need help, go home? Churches United for Fair Housing. They're in the process of building some housing. Do they send the workers home? They don't want to keep them there for weeks. School districts wanting to know, should they continue to serve school lunches for the kids next week? Community health centers like Cornerstone Family Health in the Hudson Valley. They started making a plan to triage what services they could provide and what services they couldn't. The Roswell Cancer Center, which has done so much groundbreaking research up there in Buffalo, asking if research would vanish. Should they stop interviewing new scientists who were coming to apply for jobs? This is all awful. How is freezing all these funds going to help families pay for groceries? How is it going to make neighborhoods safer? How is it going to create new jobs? Of course it won't. In fact, it's going to do the opposite. It will only raise costs, threaten communities, kill good-paying jobs. Under Donald Trump's plan, America is less safe, less healthy, and families are on the chopping block. Food inspectors, should they go home? Don't we want our food to be safe? And even small things. I was in Buffalo and Rochester Monday before, talking about the $300 million we all put in the budget to fight avian flu in November. Is that going to be cut? The price of eggs was $2 a year ago. It was $4 in November. It's $5 to $6 in New York right now. It'll go up to $8. That's just one small cut affecting America's costs on something they're really aggravated about, the high cost of the price of eggs. So, this is just terrible. Now, I know you'll say, well, there's a federal judge on Monday who's going to rule. They put a pause. We know what Trump and Vogt are up to. This is their blueprint. This is what they want to do. And they are going to keep at it. But I want to assure the American people, we are going to keep fighting and fighting and fighting until this cruel, evil program that causes such chaos from one end of America to the other is dead. Patty. Oh, wait, I forgot to mention one thing. Just a little news. Last night I talked to a few of the governors, and tonight we will be on the phone with the governors, with the Democratic governors, not only to get feedback from their states, but to coordinate our response. This response is going to continue for a long period of time, and it's going to be in every corner of America at every level of government. Patty, let me get my papers.
Well, thank you, Leader Schumer. While a judge has put this illegal move to freeze federal grants on hold for a very few short days, as Senator Schumer talked about, the threat and the chaos and the panic remains. And let's be clear, Trump's administration's half-hearted steps yesterday to clean up this massive mess they have made just affirms two things. One, they are still illegally withholding federal funds that are law. And two, this is an administration whose sheer incompetence, combined with their bad intentions and willful disregard of the law, is creating mass panic and chaos and hurting people everywhere. Their explanations have created no clarity or certainty for many panicked families, businesses, nonprofits, towns, and states. And they don't actually change the basic fact that Trump is holding up funding our communities are counting on, and funding that is law. Because first off, there are a lot of programs they are saying won't be affected, when that is not what organizations across the country are experiencing. Just one example, yesterday, Head Start providers were locked out of their reimbursement portal, meaning folks that are taking care of our youngest kids were suddenly not sure how they're going to keep the doors open or pay their teachers and staff. Rental assistance. The payment system for housing authorities was down yesterday. I checked again with my staff this morning. It is still down. And beyond that, there is just a long list of programs still left completely on the chopping block. Programs that help red states and blue states alike. Meanwhile, a tribe back in my home state of Washington told me just a little bit ago that they are having to determine if they need to lay off 400 people. Community health centers have been having difficulty drawing down their federal funds. Sometimes they are the only providers, especially in our rural or remote communities. It is the end of the month. They need to make payroll. There are real patients to consider here as clinics have to think about whether they have the funds to cover services because of this illegal move. Funding for firefighters. You know what doesn't stop when federal funding stops? Fires. I mean, the list goes on and on. The calls are coming in, and the chaos, I'm here to tell you, has not died down this morning. There's really only one solution here in the Senate, and that is for all of us to stand up and say enough, to demand that President Trump revoke these reckless orders and recognize Congress. Congress has the power of purse. We will fight this in the courts, yes, but President Trump needs to back down from this reckless order that is hurting Americans and just follow the law as Congress wrote it. This kind of freeze is going to hurt their states just as much, if not more. This is not a red or blue issue. And so, as Leader Schumer has said, we're going to keep sounding the alarm and pointing out who President Trump is hurting. We're going to listen to folks back home and raise their stories for everyone to hear. None of us were elected to hurt people or sow chaos. We are elected to help people and solve problems. I hope every member of Congress works with us to make that clear and work to tell President Trump the law is the law. Work to tell him that Congress is a co-equal branch of government and the executive is there to execute the laws Congress has written. The White House needs to stop hurting the American people.
Senator Peters.
Well, thank you. I won't reiterate some of the comments made by my colleagues here, except for the fact that all that is happening in my colleague states is also happening in the state of Michigan. So this is clearly a national issue, and I think I speak for all of my colleagues in our caucus that are experiencing this. Grant funding pay for police, firefighters, which is something that is particularly problematic. One thing I haven't heard here, but I've heard back in my state, there are even small businesses, especially those that get grants like the SBIR. Small businesses are worried, will I be able to make payroll? Do I need to worry about that? Do I need to tell my employees that? And small businesses, as all of my colleagues believe, are the heart and soul of our economy. It's where the rubber meets the road in terms of our local communities, and they're very fearful about what this could mean for them. Road, bridge construction coming to a halt. And what does that do? It raises the cost as well. Taxpayer money, more taxpayer money will be needed to complete these vital projects because of this chaos being created by President Trump. Heating assistance. I'm a cold state in Michigan. Heating assistance is also one that people worry a great deal about. And I know there's a court case that has just come through, but I think it's important to understand that courts have already ruled on this. We know that this is not constitutional, what he's doing. The president cannot hold funding back that Congress has appropriated. We saw this same battle play out when Richard Nixon was the president. Richard Nixon held back funding for key programs. It went to court. There was a Supreme Court decision that rejected that, Train versus City of New York. It said the president cannot withhold, in that case, water protection funding. There are other cases. More recently, in 1998, Clinton versus New York, where the Supreme Court determined that the president cannot unilaterally cancel appropriations that were made by Congress. But this administration doesn't believe that. They believe that they can determine what's constitutional, not the Supreme Court. In fact, we had Mr. Vogt before my committee. We have joint jurisdiction with budget over OMB, particularly for personnel matters. And I was stunned, actually stunned by Mr. Vogt's comments when I asked him how that where he, in his past tenure, when he worked in the first administration, withheld funding that also hurt people. We've seen this play out before. If you recall the hurricane in Puerto Rico, it was Mr. Vogt, Mr. Trump, that would not send money to victims of a massive hurricane in Puerto Rico, families who were hurting, families who didn't know where their next meal would come from, didn't have a roof over their head, and they withheld funding. It's mean, it's cruel, it's unconstitutional. And when I pressed Mr. Vogt, he said, well, the Empowerment Act is unconstitutional. I don't know anywhere where an OMB director has the power to actually determine what's constitutional and unconstitutional. And when I pressed him on that, he said, well, the president does. And I go, why does the president have that power? He said, because he won an election. Because he won an election, he has the ability to go in there and just say, this is unconstitutional. I'm going to do what I want. Mr. Trump or President Trump believes that he can say, we're going to fully fund this program and this program, and I don't care what Congress has said. We know the legal authority is very clear. It's a very concerning development. We know court cases can take time, and people who depend on this money do not have time. Firefighters do not have time. As Senator Murray mentioned, fires still occur. People in small businesses, they got to make a payroll. Many people who work in those businesses literally live paycheck to paycheck, and you're putting them in an unconscionable position. And I fear that what we're going to see out of OMB is can make this problem even worse. As we're looking at personnel issues, which are before my committee and the government services aspect of his GAC, where there's now so-called buyout program to take away or to minimize civil servants, professional civil servants in agencies across the government. And their plan under Schedule F is to replace them with political cronies that will only do the bidding of President Trump and Mr. Vote. We've also played that before. If you remember, we have a civil service system because in the 1800s we had basically a patronage system in our government where we had unqualified people who were inept, they were corrupt, and now President Trump wants to bring that back. He wants inept, corrupt people that are just 100% loyal to him. And the end result is that everyday people are going to be hurt, which is why we have to fight it.
Heinrich.
Gary mentioned what Russell Vogt said about the president having just won an election. I just won an election by double digits, and what I can tell you is that most people voted for cheaper eggs. They did not vote for this chaos. And people are absolutely beside themselves with what's going on out there. And yesterday, despite what the White House has said, enormous numbers of people in red and blue states were impacted by this. And I think it's probably smart to start with Medicaid because it has such an enormous impact, especially on rural states. Medicaid obviously impacts poor kids and is how they oftentimes access health care. It's also how we finance much of the nursing home system and the long-term care system. All of that was thrown up in the air yesterday as our portals were locked down and reimbursement stopped. Now, by the end of the day, they said, oh, no, Medicaid, we didn't mean that. Well, why? Was it a coincidence that all of us had our Medicaid portal shut down at the same time? And this is true of, despite what I've seen the White House say on cable news this morning, Head Start and nonprofits who serve veterans, who serve sexual assault services, who do housing in our communities. If you just look at New Mexico alone, let me walk you through some of the programs that were impacted yesterday. The New Mexico High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program. This is the law enforcement coordination program that we use to go after cartels and fentanyl trafficking. They could not access their funds yesterday. Is that what we want? We want our law enforcement cut off from the funds that allow us to attack the fentanyl problem and go after the cartels who are profiting off that? Schools were thrown up in the air as would they be able to pull down their grant money, and do they need to start making decisions immediately about other services because they won't have those grant fundings? Here's one that really pisses me off. Sexual assault services in Northwest New Mexico. I heard from the primary nonprofit that provides sexual assault services in the northwestern part of my state. They told me yesterday, quote, as a victims service provider, this memo directly threatens our ability to serve survivors of sexual assault. These survivors cannot wait for a pause while a federal agency analyzes the funding that enables us to provide them with life-saving services. They need our help now in the immediate wake of the most traumatic and difficult moments of their lives. That kind of sums up just how ridiculous this order was and how it threw the most basic services into question yesterday. I talked to a tribe as well. I talked to a number of tribes. We heard from all corners of Indian country in our state yesterday. One of the Pueblos told me they are still locked out of their housing funding even after the judge's order took effect. So they are still locked out, and people who have given up their previous housing, given up rental agreements, were getting ready to move into houses, can't do that right now because all of their funding has been frozen. Disaster assistance. This one has got to have everybody scratching their heads. We have had unprecedented disasters recently in New Mexico. We had huge fires in both the northern and southern parts of our states and the floods that come after those fires. Right now, as of this morning, we were asking FEMA if these funds are still paused or not, and their answer to us was, we don't know. So you're going to tell people who are the victim of these fires, one of which was actually the result of actions of the federal government that impacted these communities, that that we're going to hold up your disaster assistance funding until we figure out whether giving you that funding is somehow woke? I mean, this is just ridiculous, folks. So my message to all of you and to the administration is simple. Let's follow the law. Let's get back to democracy, and let's get back to work for the American people who just want to be able to go about their lives without this chaos.
Thank you, my colleagues. First, I wanted to make two more points. So you've heard we're hearing from people from every corner of our states, but we are also, I was today on a Zoom with about 50 TV stations in New York. We are urging, I did, and we are all urging our groups to contact particularly their Republican senators and their Republican congressmen and tell them to tell Trump to cut this out. It's causing too much chaos. That's number one. Number two, so Carson has this plan, flood the zone, throw so much junk against the wall that no one will notice. Well, they sure screwed up with this one because everyone's noticing. And what are they noticing? They're noticing health care and housing for seniors and veterans being cut, funding for hospitals and community health centers being cut, Meals on Wheels and food pantry being cut, school meal programs being cut, tax relief for families, veterans in retirement being cut, police and firefighting funding being cut, funding for the HIDA program, which Martin mentioned, and we have the same problem in New York State. Some of our HIDA people are complaining, being cut, disaster relief being cut, small business being cut. This has woken up the American people about what this administration is up to. They tried to flood the zone. This broke right through. Questions on this subject? This subject. Yep.
So yesterday there were a number of Democrats who, in protest because of this, switched their vote from the cloture vote to oppose Sean Duffy on the floor. Should we continue to see that on other votes for nominees who might be bipartisan in protest of this?
Well, there is.
How that will play out on these
Yeah, there are certain nominees that we're particularly focusing on. Kennedy today, I guess he's having his hearing as we speak now. The guy from the FBI, Kash Patel, Tulsi Gabbard of DNI. We're focused on some particular people who we think we might get some Republican support on. Yes?
Obviously, there's a government funding deadline in the middle of March. How is this affecting those negotiations or lack of negotiations?
I'll call on
I'm happy to
Patty as
respond
our
to that.
appropriator.
You're absolutely correct. There's a funding deadline March 14th. We need to have a top line. We need to get our committees working to reach an agreement that has enough votes in the House and the Senate to pass. It is extremely difficult to agree to a compromise on anything if the White House is going to assert that they control the funds, we don't. So this is really putting that in jeopardy.
Yes. Yes, sir.
You talk about these different organizations and people in New York reaching out out to you, and you've encouraged them to obviously keep up this effort and to possibly contact the president in any way, shape, or form. But do you realistically think that the president is going to listen to many of these people in upstate New York who are struggling?
The roots of democracy are deep. And what we're saying is go to your local official, your local congressman, your local senator, and have them get to the president. But the roots of democracy are deep. People are aroused. I haven't seen people so aroused in a very, very long time in terms of trying to get this done. So, yes, I think democracy will have an effect, and we are going to keep at it. We're going to keep at it legally. We're going to keep at it legislatively, but we're also going to keep at it in terms of the grassroots. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.